Good morning, Jody. How are you?
I'm great, thanks, Kate. How are you?
I'm very well. It's blindingly sunny behind you.
It is. It's nice and bright. Do you need me to move a bit? If am I a bit too backlit?
No, you're looking glorious. No, it's just reminding us that spring is on its way. I went walking this morning and the datura flowers are dripping and the jasmine is growing, and here we go.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
here-
the birds are all here, so yeah, they're always a great indication that spring has arrived.
Yeah. And, today I've gathered you here to talk about nourishment because that's what we're talking about this month at Soul Advisor for the month of September. And even as soon as the word nourish was mentioned, I thought about you, Jody, because that's what you do.
That is what I do, or I aim to do anyway.
And you've got a few different strings to your bow that help you to nourish people. One of them that I'm most familiar with is your writing, and you've written 2 or 3 cookbooks.
42 cookbooks.
42 cookbooks. What? That's nutty.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I've been a recipe writer for 25 years, and it's funny how people are always most familiar with my most recent ones. But yeah, it's been a long life of recipe books for me.
I don't think I've ever heard of anybody doing 42 cookbooks, but I suppose maybe I'm just as ignorant about other people.
Well, for some of us, it's a profession. For others, it's they do one and it's amazing. But as a home economist, that's what I was trained to do, was write recipe books. So I did that for very many years and on lots of different topics. I had a French publisher. I owned my own publishing company, and um, yeah. So for me, it wasn't until I got into the world of health that I really felt like I was writing my true style of recipe that I wanted to be writing. I think it's quite easy to be a good recipe writer when you're writing food recipes with loads of sugar and fat and all those things. But for me, food has been a long time about nourishment. I think, when I came to my yogic journey all those years ago now, about 16 years ago, it was opening into the window of macrobiotics. And then I journeyed from there into Ayurveda. And, I've just learnt that, if we aren't nourishing ourselves with not just food, but an awareness of our behavior. And that's what I love about both of those traditional schools of medicine and wellness and longevity, is it's not all about the food. And I think in the West, we've got caught up with nourishment meaning food, and got a bit obsessed with it, actually. And the longer I'm here and walking and existing, the more I get to know that nourishment comes from so much more than food. Like we've had the fires down here, and my nourishment through that whole period didn't come from food. It was, the food that was available was white bread with whatever was on it, but the nourishment came from the community. It came from the gathering of people. It came from the conversations. It came from the giving. It came from so much more. So I think, our one-dimensional approach and relationship to nourishment, for me, it needs to change, because so many people come to me. I'm an Ayurvedic practitioner, and so many people come to me wanting to know what to eat. And, if only it was that simple. It's, what are you doing? How are you eating? Are you eating on the run? Excuse my dog. Are you eating on
Dogs
the
are very
run?
nourishing. I
Are you
love dogs.
living on the run? Are you living on the run? Because in Ayurveda, if you're moving too quickly and you're trying to fill up all of your space with activities, then there's no space in your life to digest your food, your experiences, your conversations, your emotions, all of those things. And I think we have to remember that we're a big container. Our bodies are a big container. And how we move that container, how we soothe that container, and how we rest that container all add up to really important parts of how nourished we will feel on so many levels.
Jody, you've just brought up so many bits and pieces that are so important to explore. So I'm glad we've got 20 minutes together. Let's go there. The first thing is you've talked about nourishment not just being food, food being part of the story. But I guess we're both yoga teachers, and we both know that situation where people come to us and say, I'd like to do yoga to get my abs to be flatter, or to get stronger in my back or whatever. It's an entree, isn't it? And food, it's very sexy food. It's kind of a great reach out. But I'm glad to hear that when somebody comes to you, that the story, that's your entree into the story of nourishment. Yeah, you're an Ayurvedic practitioner. You're also a Japanese yoga teacher. You're a counselor as well. Anything else that I should know about while we're talking?
No, that's about it. And a recipe writer, a home economist, and yeah, a cleaner a lot of the time. I spend a lot of time cleaning, and I make chai as well. So yeah,
that's a prerequisite. You can't be a yoga teacher. You can't be a yoga teacher without making good chai. That's one thing. So all right, that's plenty big enough bows, like first of all, knowing a little about Ayurvedic lifestyle consultation and Ayurvedic doctoring, it's huge, isn't it? Like there's so many aspects when we're talking about nourishment for people. It's about diagnosing what that person actually needs to nourish them in particular. The same is true with your Japanese yoga bow. Being a Japanese yoga teacher, we look at the 5 elements and then we go, that one's jitsu, that one's kyo. How do we need to balance what's going into that body? So there's no kind of black and white about nourishment. And I think that's something that I'd love you to talk a little bit about, personalizing nourishment.
Yeah, and I think, thanks, Kate, because all of that is true. But I think in the West, what we've decided with nourishment is that it means adding things. Like so many people come to me with a list this long of supplementation. And my teacher, Dr. Claudia Welsh, really opened a big thing for me around nourishment being about the medicine of subtraction. So that has become a really big mantra for me when people come to see me, is what can you take away so that you can feel more nourished? Because even in me talking about what I do, there's so many things that I've got that I'm juggling, that the thing that nourishes me the most at the moment is time. And even if it's taking, like yesterday afternoon, I just took half an hour to lie on my lounge with my feet up and take a breath and pat my dog and just say, it can wait. It can wait. I don't have to bookend every activity, just because it's there to be done, So I think when people come to me, the first thing I ask them when they start talking about what's going on for them is, what could we take out? What could we, subtract so that you can feel less weighty, less overwhelmed, less anxious, and can, I know before we came on air, we were talking about the word busy. Like, I don't use the word busy. I took it out of my vocabulary because it was an adjective that wasn't working for me, or a noun or a verb. It was going everywhere. It was just becoming a lazy way of describing this thing that was happening in my life. And so I've decided to say to people, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and I could be doing a little bit too much. And I'm aware of that. And especially as we, like, I embrace winter totally, and then I come launching out of winter like some kind of juggernaut, you know. It's like, woo! I've raced it for so long. I've got all of this wonderful liver energy that's sort of allowing me to sort of like, hi, I'm here. And then I go, whoa, gosh, calm down. Okay. So it's becoming aware for me and my clients, trying to get them aware of what energy they have. It's like, you know how much money you've got, and you know how much you've got to spend. How much energy do you have? And what do you want to do with that energy bank that is going to nourish and fulfill you, as well as do the things you need to do? So have you had your time in nature? Have you sat still enough to enjoy that cup of tea that you're having? Or are you scrolling along your phone? Like, I really try to encourage people to push out multitasking, because it's not nourishing anything. Nothing is being done properly in a multitasking world, you know, and women are so good at thinking they can multitask. But nothing is being processed or digested adequately. It's all being kind of semi-done. So those are the things I say to my clients, you know, stop looking outside for the information of the things that are going to nourish your internal world. So don't look outside. Don't compare your inner world with someone else's outer world, thinking their outer world is going to nourish your internal world, because that's not the case. We're all individuals. So it's in the going slower and the doing less that I have found much more satisfaction and pleasure and contentment. Whereas I think we've all been sold a very big story that if you do all the doing and you tick all the boxes, there's going to be some amazing, you know, jubilation at the end of it. And not my experience, you know. The nourishment comes for me when I'm still enough to see the birds that come into the garden, and I notice we've got new ones this spring. It comes when I walk outside and I have enough time to stand next to the jasmine and actually smell that fragrance and let it, you know, infiltrate every single cell within me that says, hello, spring. It comes from, you know, sitting still and really appreciating the flavors in my food. It comes from not rushing to reply to a friend's conversation and just letting those words fall on my ears and then move to my heart and really feel into what that person is saying. That is nourishing for both me and the other person.
Jody, that's just absolutely spot on with what we're doing here at Soul Advisor. Absolutely spot on. So our tagline, I don't know if you've noticed, is nourish yourself, heal our world. And there's no way that unless you create that space to nourish yourself and sit, and as you speak about, it's not about just getting more and more forms of nurturing, hanging a great big pill bag off your back of supplements, you know, rushing to do the next thing that you know is going to be good for you. It's not about that. It's about the absorption, and you can't absorb unless you give yourself that time and that focus and that stillness to do so. So we're talking a lot about it in terms of decolonization, I guess. And I'm not just talking about that in a political sense. I'm talking about that in the fact that we've been sold a story, as you talked about before, about, you know, you must buy all these things, you must have all these experiences in order to be the person you want to be, whereas probably the opposite is true. And I wanted to share with something with you and ask you if you've seen it. As Japanese yoga teachers, perhaps you've come across something called 72 seasons.
No, I haven't.
I am going to share it with you, Jody, and I'll share it with everybody on the link too. So it's a beautiful app, and it's from Japan. So what 72 Seasons is about traditionally, you know how exquisitely mindful traditional Japanese culture is, which is why you and I both love it. So they traditionally, the seasons were broken down into 4-day lots. And in each of those, there was a haiku, a poem, there was a focus point, there was a plant that, you know, maybe now these little berries are coming up, maybe now these stems are starting to show a silver color, etc., etc. So there's a traditional food. So you'd go around the village and you'd share that food with each other. And that would be a traditional fish, a traditional veggie dish, whatever it was going to be. And there may be even a festival that celebrated that. So this is an exquisite app. And my dream, Jody, maybe you'll help me actualize
Can you take
this.
me back there?
Yeah, I'd love to. What I think would be amazing is for us to create a similar equivalent with our First Nations people here, because
wow.
lo and behold, I was walking with Auntie Margaret Campbell up here in Sydney, and she said, "Suppose none of you know." And it always sounds like an accusation with Auntie Margaret, and it is. "Suppose none of you know there's 72 seasons here." And I was like, oh. So
Wow.
yes. So I think you and I might work with her to discuss this and try and create our own app for you and country. Hey.
Would be beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Because for me, I was going to say, Kate, I think there is nothing more nourishing than connecting with mother. And that is for me, Mother Nature, Mother Earth, whatever we call it. And in Chinese medicine, that is what the nourishment, the grounding is. And unfortunately, we've been sold consumption, which is, you know, trying to fill up that empty container that we feel inside of ourselves with other things. And when it can't be consumables, it becomes sweetness, sugar, stimulants, you know, something, another person, you know, it's grabbing from the outside, trying to fill this hole. And you know, if you want to nourish yourself and you want something really, really simple, it is outside. It is outside there. You know, on Sunday, I'd had a really big week and I was like, what do I need? And I just went and I went out on the ocean on a whale watching trip. And, you know, it's like I'm a car and I've pulled up to a Bowser when I go into nature, and it just fills me right up so quickly. And it's so simple. It's walking on the beach every day without your shoes on, you know, it's doing simple things, but without a timetable, because it's when you're doing them and ticking them off and running through them, you're not anchored enough in the experience to actually absorb them, you know. And nourishment comes from absorption and integration. Nourishment doesn't come from ticking off boxes, you know. That is more a broadcast system so that your ego can be satisfied. Nourishment doesn't really understand the ego and its driving forces. So, you know, it's, if I was to say anything about nourishment, is, you know, as I say to my clients, get to know yourself. Get to know what makes you tick, what makes you uncomfortable, what feels yummy, what feels icky, you know, where it feels lovely, you know, what feels so deeply special. For me, I sit in this nook of my house because the sun comes in and it hits my face and it literally feels like, you know, I live alone and I have a dog and I don't have a lot of physical touch, but it's so nourishing to be touched by the sun. So it's learn those things that you don't have to spend money to feel, and learn those things that you don't need to be relying on another for, because otherwise it does become depleting, really depleting, if you're constantly seeking outside yourself for things that fill up your internal thing, if they're not naturally provided. And get grateful, get really grateful, because those people who look outside and go, well, it's raining today. Be grateful for the rain. The rain is nourishing our very, very dry continent we live on. Just be aware that there's so many things. Gratitude, I believe, is a hugely nourishing thing, and it's a practice. And if you want to feel nourished, you have to invest and have intention in that. Waking up every day saying, I want to feel as nourished as I can be just by breathing and being here.
So I totally agree. And two things about that. Gratitude, gratitude again takes noticing, takes space, takes a freedom of mind, a kind of emptying the mind so that you can actually feel what you're doing. Our beautiful Deb Shepherd, who's the CEO, she started something called the Gratitude Festival, and it was all about gratitude. And just this morning, the guy that did Fantastic Fungi, which most people have probably watched, he's putting out a new movie called Gratitude. And so again, I'll put that in the link because the premiere is happening in about a week, I think. So our community should know about that.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think, it's respect, isn't it? So gratitude's based on respect for all that we're given and enabled to live with, so that we can do our work in the world, so that we can be present, so that we can enjoy. So respect, gratitude, nourishment, it's all part of the same story.
Yeah,
And you've just told me your book is out of date. So I would love, not out of date, sorry, out of publication because you've sold out.
Yeah.
Have you got other books that are out there that people can buy?
Both my Ayurvedic books are now out of stock, unless you can find them somewhere online as a second handy. But just stay tuned. I'll keep you up to date, Kate. I'm hoping to get the rights from my my publisher, or they will reprint in the next, hopefully not too long. But you can always follow me on my Instagram, or my Facebook. I'm always sharing recipes and doing plenty of things. And, go on your own journey, find out, there's one thing about really having a relationship with food, and it doesn't have to be growing your own food, but it's your relationship, what it is that you want to sit in front of each day. And be careful, because the mind can tell you certain things. Get to know the things that you eat that feel good inside of you.
Yes,
and
Jody,
don't let anyone tell you what that is.
That's not just your taste buds.
No.
Wait for 24 hours and see what happens to you and how your energy levels are, and see how shiny your eyes feel and whether you feel like going for that walk, or all the other things that happen. And one thing that you and I have been brought up through with Japanese yoga is the 50 chews, isn't it? So getting to feel that sense of gratitude and respect for anything that you put in your mouth, and getting to know what you're putting in your mouth by trying to chew that thing 50 times, or at least until it's liquid before you swallow, which is going to be good for nourishing yourself and absorbing, but it's also really good to pay respect. And whilst doing that, thinking, where did this egg come from? I wonder which chicken laid it. What would that chicken have looked like? And what do they do? How do they feel about it, etc. It's so important to make those connections.
And I think also not being so serious about it, like it is just something. It's something that we are so incredibly privileged to have such easy access to, and to remember to join together with it, because I think food that is shared has just a hugely, hugely nourishing quality that I can't even begin to describe. There's something about the gathering of food that has been gathering and sharing food that has been happening since time, recorded, and we are doing less and less and less of that. And if anyone was to ask me why I think half of the digestive problems happen, it's because of that. I don't think we're meant to dine alone. I don't think that's meant to be a purpose of our lives. And ironically, it's something I do quite a lot, but it's, I think, just understanding, you know, that thing of, am I nourishing myself or medicating myself with food? And if you're medicating with yourself with food, you need to do yourself a favor and go inside and, you know, look at that emotional stuff, because no amount of food is ever going to solve your emotional stuff. It just doesn't work like that, you know. So don't put jobs onto food that it's not capable of doing. So food is a medicine when it's used in a certain way, but it's never going to override trauma. It's never going to override your anger. If you've got a load of it and then you eat something and wonder why you can't digest it, it's actually not about the food. It's about what you were feeling before you put that food in it. And treat your preparation of food as your yoga practice. Like in Ayurveda, that's called a sadhana, and it's a practice. And you do it with awareness. You do it with a clean body and hopefully a clean mind and a really, really beautiful intention, because you're there with the intention that what you're putting in your body is going to nourish you. So you chop with attention and intention, and, you know, you just, as you say, pay your respects to where that food has come from, be that animal or the ground or the person who has, you know, been on the land, and the person who's delivered to the store or the market or wherever it's gone. You know, there's been a lot of places that it has stopped before it comes to you sometimes. And, you know, just paying your respects for that. You know, when you're roasting your spices, really allowing that energy and that aroma of those spices and the history of those plants talk to you.
Jody, that's such a good thought to go out with. We will have to finish because I've got to jump in another meeting in 2 minutes. Talking about not back to backing, I'd like to give us 2 minutes to defrag and say goodbye. So thanks everyone for joining us, and I'll put a couple of those links that we just mentioned into the broadcast. And really, really, really appreciate your years of experience and wisdom, and 42 cookbooks. Isn't 42 the meaning of life, Jody, according to Monty Python?
If it is, I've missed like the dictionary.
Okay, well, take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and thanks very much, Jody.
Thanks, Kate.